Hello, Gelato Familia. It's George, the Disney Italiano, coming to you with another video. I got my good friend here again, all the way from the UK, Mr. Matthew Murr. And today we're going to discuss something that Matthew actually brought to my attention, which I thought was very creative. This time we're going to the Walt Disney Studios out here in Burbank, California, where Matthew has some ideas of like what they could do as not even just an add-on to the studio, but to pay tribute to um, a few people in the industry. One in particular who is no longer with us, unfortunately, but they played a major impact on uh, in music, in theater, for the Walt Disney Studios, for the Renaissance films, and what have you. Um, but in any case, it's revolving around Alan Menken and the late great Howard Ashman, for which, as I was mentioning, they played a big part in Disney and Disney music in the Renaissance era. But Matthew had a very good idea to kind of to uh, to showcase them, to kind of imprint them in the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, but also utilize spacing area of something of how they could actually upgrade to the studio. But before we dive into that, Matthew, how are you doing today?
Brilliant, thank you.
Awesome. Do you want to touch upon a little bit of your ideas of the kind of like explain a little bit of like what your thought process was for it?
Yeah, my idea was that Disney up until the 1980s used to have its own scoring stage on site. But a testimonial from a number of composers actually said that the acoustics inside that stage were awful. Like if you were to try and get an orchestra of like 80 or 90 players, which is quite typical for most Hollywood scores, it would only sound like 55 musicians at most.
Oh,
And so
okay.
they were forced to rent and other scoring stages.
And I have to say too, Matthew, I find it fascinating of how much that of music, how of orchestra, because I remember you sent me this was a couple years ago. This was for Disney's 100th.
Once
Uh,
upon a studio.
yeah, and it was all about of how you literally broke down um, the music and the score of everything, and how like in fine detail of how you explain that,
Yeah.
and I just find
The,
that fascinating.
it would have been played by an even larger orchestra. It would be like a 110 musicians, the exact same number in the used in the scores for the Star Wars prequels.
Oh, that's fascinating. So now, so of what you were just describing, what does that tie into for the studio in Burbank, and how you would incorporate Alan Menken and Howard Ashman into that?
Well, my plan would be for a whole separate building just north of the animation building, so directly across the street from the main Burbank office complex on Riverside Street, I believe.
Okay.
And it would be a whole facility dedicated to music and sound editing. Thing on the ground floor, or would of course be the centerpiece, is a massive 8,000 foot scoring stage called the Alan Menken scoring stage. It would be more than enough to fit it the size of a huge orchestras and choirs used in the likes of the Star Wars prequels or Rogue One or Marvel flicks even. And it would actually come close to the size of, Abbey Road in London.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it would also come close to the size of another scoring stage that's no longer with us called the Todd AO scoring stage, which opened in the early 90s and closed in 2007. I believe the scores for The Lion King and Aladdin were actually recorded on that stage.
See, and that's great, and that's a great piece of history. But like, I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that, because even though Disney can utilize like other um uh
Scoring venues.
facilities, yeah, like outside of Burbank or outside of like their own domain, sometimes it'd be nice for them to just kind of do something within their own domain. And
Something on their own turf.
exactly, and for them to have a building that would be big enough that can hold a much larger orchestra and what have you. I think that would be very beneficial, definitely, and very. It would be costly up front, obviously, but I think that they would definitely make back, in the long term.
It would be a huge return on investment.
Yes, absolutely. And then, so you said that you would, name it after Alan Menken,
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
which fortunately he is still with us, still doing great work. Um, and
There, there,
then, oh, go ahead.
and on the upper floors, there would be a few smaller recording studios for small ethnic percussion ensembles or rhythm sections or even solo vocalists. But then on the top floor would be either be the other centerpiece, the editing suite.
Okay, so you would literally have almost like everything
Yeah, under
at
one
their
roof.
disposal,
And that would be named after Howard Ashman, that editing suite.
and I like that too because I love how that you said at like the very top, with the editing suite where you would kind of put Howard Ashman kind of like at the very top of like the crown, so to
Yeah.
speak, the crown jewel. And that's who, for me, anyways, that's who Howard Ashman was. I mean, I absolutely love Alan Menken. I think they were a dynamic duo. You couldn't have like one without the other as far as like the collaboration. But there was something about Howard that was just so different and how he had his background, in theater and Broadway and, how he utilized, story making and creativity with the music and incorporating that into the Disney animated films, starting off with The Little Mermaid and then, of course, moving into Beauty and the Beast. But he also had like a little touch of like his handprint on Aladdin.
Yeah, what happened was Alan Menken wrote over background score to all of the songs, and Ashman wrote lyrics for three of the songs. I believe he wrote over lyrics for or friend and for Friend Like Me, Arabian Nights, and Prince Ali. But then Tim Rice had to take over part way through the process. He had to put his work on The Lion King on pause. So he wrote the lyrics for A Whole New World, and he also wrote a reprise of Prince Ali along with One Jump Ahead.
Okay. And I do know the only thing before his passing that Howard had a little touch of A Whole New World was actually the opening of the song where he was talking to Alan of like, how could we start the song? So Howard suggested, you want to have it like whimsical, like, they're flying up. So like that do 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 do
Yeah.
do 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 do. Like he was the one that kind of came up with that opening um sound for A Whole New World. So I mean, even with him being, very sick and what have you under the circumstances, that he was still able to have a very effective imprint on Aladdin just as much as he did Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I think that's really great of how um, to incorporate Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. But again, as you had mentioned, I love how you kind of like put Howard Ashman kind of like, as I said, like the top crown jewel.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that. Um, in your opinion, would you think that having a facility like this, it would encourage Disney to do more bigger, ambitious projects?
Yeah, it probably would, and it would also just give them more incentive to stay on their own turf, just generally. Like
Yeah,
they wouldn't have to go out to other studios to do as much because although all of those other scoring stages do offer very good sound, Disney could easily have their own.
yeah, I'm really surprised that they haven't.
I'm
Like,
surprised that they did actually get rid of their scoring stage in the mid 80s.
yeah, that's something, and especially again, kind of going back to the Renaissance era and everything of how everything was on grand scale because that was the plus side of having Howard on their team was as a creative, and coming off of Broadway and theater, he literally incorporated the that way of the formula into the films. Like when you see the opening sequence of Beauty and the Beast with the song Belle, with the townspeople and everything, you literally feel like you're watching a Broadway musical like live, but it's in an animated feature format. And that was all Howard. So the fact that all like the music and everything was orchestrated on such a grand scale in the Renaissance, yeah, I'm really surprised. I feel like that they got rid of it in the 80s because at that time they probably didn't know really what to do with it. It was at a time where, Disney animation was kind of still falling apart in a sense, especially after Walt's passing, like between like the 70s and
And especially after the Black Cauldron,
yeah,
that
exactly.
film almost killed the animation industry.
Yeah, because there was like it was so much money and time and effort put into that film, and yeah, so they probably were like, okay, we're spending money, we're losing money, so how can we kind of like offhand this, So unfortunately, I think if they knew what was to become of the Renaissance era, they probably would have kept that building, or if not, like expand it to what like to the degree of what you're describing.
Yeah, they probably would feel compelled to just tear down the original touring stage and build a much larger one.
Yeah. And after the Renaissance era, again, I'm surprised that they didn't utilize like something of that because even after the success of The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, it still moved into, with Pocahontas, The Hunchback, Hercules, Tarzan, and then even going into like the early 2000s, with Atlantis, Treasure Planet, Brother Bear. I mean, even though that they're not as high end popular than the Renaissance era, I mean, they still had very big scores. Um,
Yeah,
when it came,
virtually every score since The Little Mermaid has.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know why that they really wouldn't, get back to it and reutilize that.
Maybe they just saw little reason to do so at the time. Like they didn't think it could really hurt to go to another other scoring stage that offered similar capability to what they were looking for.
That's true. That's very true. But hopefully in time, they can get back into that and do something for their own like on the Burbank studio because that would be really cool, especially because they do a lot of studio tours. I have done several of them. So that would be really cool that if they were to actually like build something like that and incorporate that um into the tour. And I do know that they also hold D23 events up there, so they could do something that involves like with music and the orchestra and everything. So they could actually have a separate upcharge ticket, for something like that. So they would be making their money back that way as well. So yeah, so I could definitely, see that. And actually, as you were describing it, I was kind of getting like a vision of like really what it was like, what it would look like. And I think it would look very, very pristine. I think it would be very like upscale, but it would have that warm kind of Disney-fied touch to it,
Yeah,
if you will. Sort of kind of like how the Walt Disney Concert Hall looks, but then a little bit more intimate and just a little bit more obviously like downscaled. It's not going to be a huge like facility like that, but I could see like the architectural style of that.
yeah.
Yeah, so that would be really cool. But I do thank you for bringing this to my attention because I think that would be awesome for Disney to do, and I didn't really think about it. Again, until you brought it up, and I'm like, I started doing some research. I'm like, yeah, that's right. They don't have that on the studio lot anymore, and not even anymore, but they don't have anything like that on that particular scale. So to bring something back like that to pay tribute to, um, two men that actually had a huge imprint on, the Disney animation and the Disney music and just the Disney company, especially since they just recently renamed the one building to the Sherman Brothers.
Yeah.
So I mean, and they had a major impact on the company as well. So you would literally have like the Sherman Brothers, and then you would have Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, on another note. So I think that would be great. I really do.
Mm.
But I do want to thank you, Matthew, for joining me today. It's always a pleasure having you on, and I
Thank
love
you, George.
discussing these more intimate conversations more in depth.
Mm.
So I thank you for coming on. And if you want to let everyone know where they could find you on social media.
You can find me on Instagram at matthewthomasmuir@gmail.com and on Blue Sky at mattmuir24.
Awesome. And of course, I'm George, the Disney Italiano. And as I always say, in Disney Italiano fashion, stay safe, stay healthy, stay Disney. Italiano out.